Afternoon.
Tuesday.
It's Tuesday, July 20th, and we're at the Farm Museum in the office of Dottie Freeman. And Dottie has agreed to give us a little mini interview about her childhood, growing up. Nothing to do with the Farm Museum. This is about Dottie's growing up in Westminster.
Westminster, yes.
Okay, were you born in Westminster, Dottie?
There was no hospital when I was born.
Okay.
So I was born in Baltimore, St. Agnes Hospital.
They rushed you down to St. Agnes
Yes,
for...
they did.
Oh,
yes.
my goodness.
And on December 31st. So, and I...
So you were
blank blank.
You were a New Year's baby then.
New Year's Eve.
Okay,
Yeah.
how interesting.
I was a taxpayer's reward.
You were a
actually,
deduction.
You know? Yes.
Okay.
And, I was actually, my father was in the Navy and my mother and he had separated after I was born. So my grandparents raised me, which was the best thing that ever happened to me.
And you grew up right here in Westminster.
Yes, I did.
And tell me, now, you don't have to tell me the year, but what decade did you sort of come of age?
I am in love with the 50s and 60s.
Okay,
yes,
good.
That's my era.
So you
Lost in the 50s, the Ronnie Millsap song.
Yeah. So you remember what Westminster was like during that golden age, during
Absolutely,
the 1950s.
I do.
This is after
Yes.
Korea, before we went into Vietnam. You remember downtown Main Street.
Oh,
What was it like?
absolutely. When my great aunt and I, who was crippled in one leg, very slowly walked downtown, even though we got several ride offers, you know, to take us down and bring us back. She would take me along, we'd tag along, and we'd stop off at Bowers' restaurant, which is now a legal place, where Munch's Cafe near there, and she'd have a tea and I'd have a 7-Up, and we'd mosey on down to Rosenstock's because I wanted to buy some clothing, a wonderful clothing shop, and then we'd stop at the American restaurant for something else to drink and eat, and then we would go on up to Murphy's. J.C. Murphy's was there,
the
where
department store
is there, and the shoe store, Endicott Johnson's was there if it was looking for shoes, you know, and just so much to the State Theater. If we went to go to the movies, the State Theater was there, the Carroll Theater was there, and I think our last stop was at Bixler Gall, where they had a soda fountain, and we were always eating. And on the way back, we'd hit the restaurants or the stores that we didn't hit on the way up through town. It was a really neat place.
Now, did you pick a certain day of the week that you'd go shopping and go?
Friday and Saturday.
Friday and Saturday.
Friday.
I understand from talking to folks from Carroll County that are longtime residents that I'm going to say in the old days, in the 50s and the 60s, 40s too, I guess, Fridays and Saturdays were big days. It's days when people from around the county would come back into Westminster and do their shopping for the family and their socializing.
Right. It was just downtown Westminster. There wasn't any, the first shopping center was out on Route 140, Westminster Shopping Center, and I can remember that so clearly coming into play. I'm thinking, okay, what's this about? Well, we saw my grandparents, and we'd always take me to the bowling lanes. Bowling lanes, you call it now, bowling alley, you call it then.
Sure.
It was duck pins, the small, and my mother was actually a professional duck pin bowler.
No kidding.
But my grandmother and grandfather were like kids. They go to carnivals, they go to seashores, and they go bowling. And so this new shopping center had a bowling alley. So we went in. The only thing is the balls were much bigger, and they were 10 pins.
10 pin, yeah.
So we didn't know how the proper way to put your fingers in. So unorthodox, like and went professional briefly. I used these first 2 fingers, and it worked because you know I ended up with 200 score. You know, 200 scores pretty good for a girl.
Wow, that's real good.
Yeah. So, but that was a little bit later. I think that was nearing the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. But downtown was just the only thing that I was not happy with when if I would turn 16 and get my license, trying to park a car downtown because there was a lot of traffic, and you know it was like you got to back this thing in and put it in this little hole. You know, I like to pull in. You know,
but drivers. People were more patient then.
They were, and the big thrill was watching the train go by. And I remember my grandfather was the first one. He had like a 52 Chevrolet. We're sitting there, oh, there goes the train, the conductor, you know. But one time we were so close to the train, and I really didn't appreciate it because his horn got stuck.
Oh no!
Oh my gosh!
Now, was it the train conductor's horn got stuck?
No, it was my grandfather's horn.
Oh no!
Like, everybody's looking at us. Why are they blowing at this train? You know. So, but we had really good times. It was a day of time back in the 50s and 60s, when you would sit on the porch and wave to your neighbors, everyone would know everybody, and it was just, casual. You would get out more, and I think I found the reason why people sat outside more is because you didn't have air conditioning, or you want to hibernate to now,
Sure.
when it's warm.
Dottie, you told me that one time as a little girl you had an accident with a car. I guess you were on a bicycle or walking down the street?
Actually, my girlfriend had an accident on a bicycle first, was hit by a car when they were putting in the stop signs instead of traffic lights where Malcolm Drive intersects 97. And I just happened to live 2 doors down from where they put Malcolm Drive and connect at 97. And my grandmother asked me to go over to the store and get some RC Cola, which is Royal Crown Cola. And so I took the 6 glass bottles, they were glass bottles then, and started walking across, and I looked left, and usually the traffic would stop for you.
Sure.
And when I went across, evidently I got hit by a car that had stopped. They were going out to the Coke factory where they worked. It was a little past beyond the Coca-Cola factory. And the next thing I know, they were telling me that I went up in the air, flew into the windshield,
Oh no!
and came down and passed out. And they went to get my grandmother. And the first thing I said, "Oh, please don't take me into my grandmother's house. I'll get blood all over her carpeting." I was so worried about that. And I didn't realize I had a broken leg. And then my father was coming back from the South Pole with Admiral Byrd.
Right.
And he was in the Antarctica area, and they were bringing back the first penguins to the Washington Zoo.
Your father was in the Navy.
He was a career Navy man.
Wow.
Yes. And all this was transpiring, and at the same time, on the other end of the continent, I guess you would say, that I was going over for RC Cola, got hit by a car. So long story short, that broken leg that I suffered ended up with me traveling to Boston Harbor, where my father was coming back from on the USS Atka, which was an icebreaker. It broke the icebergs and ice shelves so the ships could get through. And I was carried, it was Thanksgiving, and I was carried up on this icebreaker, and they informed me, "You're one of the only women that's ever been on this ship,"
No
at that
kidding.
time. So I was in the 6th grade actually at that particular time.
So you're about 12 years old.
So I hit by a car, but I, every bad thing, something good comes out of it. So that was my good thing. So
And you got to meet some penguins.
Yes, as a matter of fact, they were the first penguins brought back to the United States, and unfortunately, they did not live because they did not have the history of how to keep them alive.
Right.
It was something like something they needed from the frozen ice that they didn't receive.
Right.
And unfortunately, they died. But since then, progress and
Figured it
research
out.
has brought more penguins back, and so now there's penguins in the Washington Zoo, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I had quite all through my life, I've had these experiences which were so beneficial.
Well, Dottie, you've been around here in Carroll County for a long time, and you've seen a lot of changes. We could talk for hours about all the changes that you've seen.
Yeah. Really.
And you've worked you work here at the History Museum, and what a wonderful place this is, where we're really going back in time. We're going back to the 1800s here.
Right.
And holding on to the tradition of Carroll County, the Farm Museum, is just amazing. But with your personal experiences and all the things that you've been through and all the changes that you've seen, and whenever I do an interview, I always like to ask this question: if you had some advice to give to somebody who is just getting started, somebody who's getting ready to graduate from high school or getting ready to graduate from college, and they really don't know what to do with their life, what advice would you give them?
Talk to an elderly person. Learn what they have gone through, and respect that, because that knowledge is just something you don't find in the history books. Because I can say from personal experience, my person that I most admire, which I didn't know it until probably after death, was my grandmother and grandfather. I learned they worked hard. They didn't have to. My grandfather was the manager of Congolium Nairn, the one industry in Carroll County. But they still had what they called a truck patch. They taught me how to live off the land. And they came through the Depression when, if you go down the cellar, as they called it, in the lard cans, as they called it, they would keep sugar and they would keep flour. There was always food there. But knowing what happened to them in the past is how they could conserve for the future. And this is what we have to do now.
Yes.
We have to learn how to conserve for the future. Electricity, the technology needs to go there.
You bring up such a valuable point. I talk to many people that lived through the Depression, and invariably they say everybody had a garden. Everybody put up whatever they could for over the winter. I mean, they'd spend the summer and the fall putting up, and making sure that they had enough to get through the winter for the next spring. We've gotten, can I say, spoiled? I think as a culture we're very used to that.
With this modern age,
we expect that things are going to be.
You get in the car and go somewhere instead of walking or taking a bike.
And you think that you can go buy strawberries any time of the year. And
my daughters used to pick them.
Well, exactly.
And for money.
Right, but you'd only get them for about a 30-day period.
Yeah.
And then they were done, and then you'd have to wait till next year. Of course, you put up as much jam as you could.
There you go.
So that you'd have them.
And see, I learned how to do that too with my grandparents. You know, everything was appreciate what's there, use it in many ways, and it was a very good source of education growing up with them.
Right, but you also bring up another very valuable point. We take our elders for granted. We think our grandparents are always going to be with us and always going to be that wonderful resource. So we don't take the time, the 15 or 20 minutes, to ask them the stories and then try to remember those.
One of my mentors that, when I was hired here, and I'll be here 25 years, was George Greer, who was one of the founding fathers. And he would always tell me, Dottie, you need to write down what you have gone through in your life, so for your grandchildren. And that, I think that's necessary. Everybody should write down, experiences, whether you think they're great, fantastic, or not. It's something that belongs to you. It's a personal history, and I think that is so much more important than sometimes than world history.
Absolutely.
Because it's your personal history.
And it's more meaningful.
It is.
And with the new technology we have, you don't even have to write it down anymore. You can just say it, and you're leaving a video record for your children.
That's one
and
good thing
grandchildren.
about technology. It
It
makes
really
life
is,
easier.
yeah. One of the other things that in talking to people over time is that I find that credit is a fairly recent, a fairly modern invention. In the old days, Depression days, in the 30s and the 40s and even the 50s, people didn't buy things with credit cards.
Oh, they bartered, didn't they?
You bartered, or you saved up until you could afford to get something.
I need a dozen eggs.
Yeah.
Would you take
Here's some
a
tomatoes.
cow or something?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And so you work through it that way. But also you didn't. You could get a line of credit. Of course, everybody had to have somebody hold a mortgage on their house.
Oh, of course.
But to buy, if you needed farm equipment or something like that, you would fix until you could save up enough to pay for the thing that you needed.
The doctor that wrapped my leg in a cast was Dr. Jeanette, which happens to be the person that would take chickens in payment for his going around to the house and being a doctor. And it so happens one of his daughters was Carroll Jeanette Shook, who was the first junior Miss Maryland, I think she was, and she worked here at the Farm Museum, one of the first volunteers.
No kidding.
And who's a great person to talk to for an interview. So, and she's got some more history than I do. She's a little bit older than me.
That's okay. That's okay. History's a wonderful thing.
It is.
Dottie, I'm going to ask you something that I don't always ask people, but you do have a lot of history.
I'm in trouble.
No, not really. What would you like to be most remembered for?
What gives me, well, aside from my family, that's number one with me, my husband and my children, my grandchildren. The legacy, I guess I would say, that I would like for people to remember is that I was able to treat everyone the way I would want to be treated. And what made me really happy was seeing the smiles on the faces of these young people that do things to leave a legacy at the Farm Museum because they want to. And working with children, it's just it's invigorating.
Yes, it is.
I enjoy working with children. I enjoy young people.
They're our
making
future.
People happy. And I'm a people person.
Yes.
So,
It shows.
Young and older. So.
Well, Dottie, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. It was really a pleasure.
Good. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed.